Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. Let's do another monthly Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis sales report, which is really a Square Enix report. And this is a very interesting time, an historical time, for the company and the larger Japanese video game industry. I wonder if some people interpret these videos as me cheering on the downfall of Square Enix, but that is not my intention at all. I actually want to see the company turn things around, and it sucks watching stumble after stumble. The game's getting farther and farther away from their roots. I've loved what the company has put out since playing both Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest I on the NES, but I can't let brand loyalty blind me. I have to be honest about what is going on now. But as always, let's go over the numbers for various mobile games, talk further about the Final Fantasy Remake Trilogy, talk about Square Enix as a whole, and let's talk about Nintendo's near future, since I probably won't bring it up in any other video. Maybe this series will evolve into covering the bigger industry. So for the mobile games, Square Enix is running out of games to list. Since the last video, Tawatsugai and Dragon Quest Champions shut down, among others, so I can consolidate some slides. Now we just have a Final Fantasy list and a non-Final Fantasy list. As always, Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is doing fine, and, as I said in the previous video, I fully expect it to last through to the end of 2024. War of the Visions also looks okay, but Brave Exvius and Record Keeper are pretty low. They have both gone many years, so if either shut down this year, I don't think it would be either surprising or feel like a failure or a defeat. I do want to point out that although Ever Crisis is healthy enough to keep itself going, it's not doing much to support Square Enix or its other games. Ideally, for publishing companies that have both console and mobile games, the profits of the mobile games would be used in part to fund the development of the console games. The potential is always there for a mobile game to become a hit and rake in absurd amounts of revenue, but that potential is much smaller than it was, say, 5 years ago. Square Enix is realizing this, and so are shutting down many mobile games or canceling projects in response. Next, we have other non-Final Fantasy titles. Romancing Saga is fine. Octopath had a solid month, but there is a possibility it will shut down this year, I don't know. Dragon Quest Walk is still the jewel in Square Enix's crown, and Dragon Quest Tact is looking good as well. Schoolgirl Strikers is somehow still here. I might install the game just for a laugh, but I looked at some recent footage and the 3 new models certainly look like they were, from some years ago, but also charming for that reason. And then we have the perennial high performers, kind of a down month overall. Alright, let's talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth again. Could we call it a flop? I think that's a strong word, but it is definitely a disappointment for the company. I recently heard an interesting theory on why it is not performing well. Potential buyers are staying away because they have not played the first in the trilogy, Remake. These players correctly assume that the trilogy tells the beginning, middle, and end of a story, and they don't want to start in the middle. Furthermore, people who have played Remake but have not beaten it could also be staying away from Rebirth for the same reason, not being caught up on the story. And we can pretty easily check what % of Remake purchasers have beaten the game by looking at the achievements, percentages, and it is well under half. So, since Rebirth is not especially attractive to folks new to the series, the potential sales of Rebirth is limited, not only to folks who have purchased Remake, but by people who have beaten it. Of course, there is the type of gamer who, say, watched someone else's playthrough of Remake and decided to start on Rebirth, but clearly that type is not numerous enough to make the game a success. In the last video, we talked about how Final Fantasy's focus on story is actually part of the reason why the series is faltering financially. Perhaps people are watching it, but they're not buying it. And so that casts a shadow over the third part of the trilogy. I bet the higher-ups are seriously considering the possibility of Part 3 selling even worse than Rebirth, because they must be asking, what if the potential buyers for this game are limited to only those who have cleared Remake and Rebirth? I think one move to alleviating that problem is putting up Remake as a free game with a PlayStation subscription. I was surprised to see that at first, but if it is true that people are staying away from Rebirth because they haven't played Remake, it makes sense that Sony and Square Enix would want to encourage sales of Rebirth by getting more people through Remake. It's kind of leaving money on the table for Remake, but hopefully trying to make it up on Rebirth and then Part 3 down the line. Now, is Final Fantasy VII Part 3 in danger of getting cancelled? I hear some talk about that. I personally don't think so. I think Square Enix is too invested at this point, with the expectations too high to back out, and it would be such a hit to their pride and reputation. But I have to wonder if it is going to be as big of a game as Rebirth. For the same reasons of pride and expectations, they may make the game as big as Rebirth, but that would be a big investment for what they are probably anticipating as a small return. It will be interesting to keep an eye on the project as we get more information. Speaking of canceling development projects, that works as a nice segue to our next topic, Square Enix's two recent bombshell announcements. One is a mass cancellation of in-work projects amounting to 150 million USD. Ouch. And two is the company saying it is rebooting itself and will not release anything major for the next 3 years. Also, ouch. This did not please the markets, and Square Enix's stock dropped for it. About the first announcement, I saw some people speculate that Dragon Quest XII was cancelled, but no. Square Enix really can only rely on Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. They really need a third or fourth tentpole IP. So yeah, they're not going to cancel potentially their biggest moneymaker. But we have heard rumors that the delayed development of Dragon Quest XII is troubled, and that they may be even starting over from scratch. And the second announcement pretty much saying Dragon Quest XII is not going to come out for those 3 years seems to confirm that. It's more likely the cancelled projects are medium to small-sized games, like one-off, AA titles or mobile titles. But yeah, Square Enix is definitely hurting now. I predicted that based on the success of Rebirth and Ever Crisis, it would determine whether or not the company would shrink its reach and footprint, but Square Enix is saying it now. We're shrinking our reach and footprint. Crazy times, which is why it is worth watching and documenting now. Let's end with some thoughts on Nintendo. They also had a bad earnings report year over year, but the reason is clear. The Switch is very long in the tooth. Tears of the Kingdom and Splatoon 3 were like the last gasp for console sales drivers in 2023. But the other day, Nintendo announced that they will show their next hardware in the latter part of 2024 to be sold in March 2025. That's all well and good, and if it can stream as easily as a PlayStation, I will buy it immediately. But what's interesting is the language they used. They did not say it will be next gen, they said it will be the successor. That is a little suspicious to me, and that may mean that it'll just be a nicer Switch, something beyond the OLED version. But I think it's going to be the next gen machine. Okay, that'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.